Hello, everyone, and welcome to our October webinar, Ransomware 2025, Get Ready or Get Wrecked. I'm your host today, Katie Watson, and if this is your first time joining us, a very warm welcome. Here at Secon, we're here to help organizations cut through the noise and take practical steps to improve their cybersecurity posture with clarity, confidence, and a human approach. So let's be honest, ransomware is not just evolving, it's escalating. This year, we've seen entire organizations frozen by attacks that have started with something as simple as a fake help desk call or a single compromised endpoint. And in 2025, the threat is faster, smarter, and harder to stop. And that is why we're here today, not to scare anyone, but to prepare. Because when it comes to ransomware, preparation isn't optional, it's all about survival. And here to help us do that is someone who has been inside the mind of the attacker themselves and now builds tech to stop them. Glenn Wilkinson, the CEO and co-founder of Agger Labs, a company that is on a mission to eradicate ransomware. Before starting Agger Labs, he spent his years as an ethical hacker, breaking into banks, governments, enterprises all around the world. All with permission, of course. But today he is going to take us behind the scenes of a modern ransomware attack, showing us how to build true resilience. So whether you're part of an internal security team or a business leader or somewhere in between, this session will be designed to be practical strategies to help you protect your organization. And just before I hand over some housekeeping rules, this webinar is being recorded and the recording will be shared with you afterwards. There will be a Q&A session at the end, so please feel free to submit your questions at any time using the Q&A function. And if you think of any questions afterwards and would like them answered, please just drop me an email. So without further ado, I would like to hand over to Glenn.
Thank you so much, Katie, and thank you everyone for joining. Let's make sure you can see my slides and I can see my own face down there. Yep, thank you so much everyone for joining. My name is Glenn. Thank you for the kind introduction. And today we are talking ransomware. Ransomware 2025, get ready or get wrecked. So before we kick off, who am I? As Katie kindly introduced, my name is Glenn, and I've had a long career as an ethical hacker, meaning my clients, my customers would pay me to break into their organizations to help them find the weak spots before the bad guys do. I've spoken at all the big hacker conferences, Black Hat and DEF CON out in Vegas, Zero Nights in Moscow, and everywhere in between. Also trained law enforcement on both sides of the Atlantic. But these days, I am the CEO and co-founder of Agger Labs, where we are on a mission to disrupt, destroy, dismantle ransomware and ransomware gangs. That's our northern guiding light, as we would say. We have one singular purpose, and that is to stop ransomware. And I'd like to tell you all about Agger today. But before we get there, let's just set the scene, make sure that we all are on the same page. I asked GPT, as you do, explain ransomware like I'm 5. And GPT came back with, okay, imagine someone locks your toy box and says you can't open it unless you give them candy. Ransomware is like that, but for computer files, and the bad guys want money to unlock it. More specifically, and more technically, ransomware is just software. It's just a computer program that runs just a normal exe file. You could literally just double click it on your computer if you had a copy. We've got stacks of samples if you'd like to play around, but it's a computer program that runs, and when it runs, it encrypts each of your files on your computer, changing the file extension. And if you try and open any of those files, you'll just see a whole bunch of gibberish. The contents are scrambled, and a ransom note like the one you see on the screen here from WannaCry is dropped on the screen saying, hey, all your files are gone. If you ever want to see them again, pay up an awful lot of Bitcoin, and maybe we'll give you a decryptor to get your files back. Hackers will also typically, during that process, steal your files and blackmail you to try and get your files back. But it's almost a somewhat simple thing, ransomware. Encrypt your files, demand money to get them back. The average ransomware attack costs an organization £3.5 million. And that's from an IBM report called the Cost of a Data Breach 2025. And that figure was an average, but that includes actual ransomware payments, but also takes into account the downtime, the loss of customer confidence, and all the ancillary effects and costs to do with ransomware. The point being, ransomware hurts. That's a lot of money. You only have to look at M&S and Jaguar and Friends to see the financial impact that it has on a modern organization. And I'll classify ransomware as what we say an existential risk. Of all the risks a modern organization can face, ransomware is one that could quite literally end your business. Either you're unable to pay up, or you can pay up, you don't get your files back, or your downtime is so prolonged that all your tight margins or your customer confidence is lost, and it can end your business. The NCSC, the National Cyber Security Center, released their annual review 2025 report last month. A lot of interesting information in there. Part that stood out to me was they analyzed and reported 429 incidents in the previous year. That's just in the UK. And of that 429 incidents, 204 incidents were classified as nationally significant. There's quite a lot to be doing significant amounts of harm. And of that, 18 incidents were categorized as highly significant. What they mean by highly significant is having a serious impact on central government, essential UK services, or large population segments or the economy. 18 is quite a large number, a small number in absolute terms. 18 times there was that level of damage inflicted by these ransomware gangs. And the NCSC went so far as to say that they identify ransomware as the most pressing cyber threat to the UK. So they're really sitting up and paying attention and telling us that we should too. We need to act, and they're encouraging us to do so. And you only have to look at the headlines. It's hard to go a day without seeing some kind of headline about data breach, ransomware, global ransomware damage costs predicted to exceed 265 billion by 2031. And of course, the poor old unfortunate folks over at Marks and Spencer's and Jaguar Land Rover, probably the hardest hit this year, still reeling from those massive attacks. And it's been what hurt them probably the most is just the prolonged downtime, especially poor old Jaguar. They have such tight margins and such short time spaces between all the different suppliers. That supply chain has been absolutely decimated. Let's take a step back. Where did ransomware come from and why does it exist? If you're in the audience, hazard a guess as to the first instance of ransomware. Would you believe it dates all the way back to 1989? And here's a screenshot of the first instance of ransomware, devised by a chap called Joseph Pop, who distributed via floppy disk at a conference. And on the 50th reboot of your PC, you get this big red pop-up message saying, hey, all your files are gone. Send me a check in the post for $189 and I'll give you a utility to get them back. Not a great idea, giving up your address like that. Obviously, you got arrested, but the idea was put forward for the first time that it was possible for hackers or criminals to encrypt your files and demand payment. As we go through the years from 1989, probably 2006, GP code, the first instance of ransomware, to have proper, strong encryption and an almost anonymous payment system. They demanded payment by a bank based out of Costa Rica called Liberty Reserve, kind of a dodgy bank, no AML or KYC, anti-money laundering, know your customer. They were quickly shut down. 2008 was the seminal moment, advent of Bitcoin. And following up in 2013, the first time with CryptoLocker, hackers leveraging this new, somewhat anonymous, untraceable cryptocurrency to demand payments. The actual payment amount was almost laughable. Let's think about $300, the first instance of CryptoLocker back then. But that was the almost the forging point of, we can encrypt files and we can demand payment in this cryptocurrency, this Bitcoin thing, which will allow us to stay, as criminals, stay anonymous. 2015, 16, 17, quite an important moment there with Petya and then NotPetya. Petya, your standard ransomware. NotPetya, probably the first instance of a supply chain attack. Hackers broke into Medoc, some accounting software, and replaced the binary update with a piece of ransomware, which is known as NotPetya. And most of Ukraine used Medoc, this MEDoc software. And instead of getting a nice new update on Monday morning, they got hit with NotPetya. Turns out it wasn't even ransomware, it was a wipeaware. So even if you tried to pay, your files got wiped anyway. 2017 is probably the first time the general public heard about ransomware with WannaCry, decimated the NHS, billions of damage worldwide. Interesting one, because it was almost a cyber weapon exploit developed by the NSA, the spooks in the States, stolen and leaked by the shadow brokers, and then modified and adapted by the Lazarus group, the hackers out of North Korea, to spread this nasty ransomware strain. Luckily, our own Marcus Hutchinson found a kill switch and turned that off. Heading towards 2019 and even into the modern day, we're seeing the big upticks of double and triple extortion. Groups like Maze and Ryuk started the double triple extortion idea. Essentially, we're going to steal your files and we're going to steal your customers' files and leak those if you don't pay up. The driving force that we're seeing today is, I would say, the industrialization of an efficient underground economy of ransomware operators. The hacks against Marks and Spencers and Co-op and all these recent ones by a group that we commonly refer to as Scattered Spider. It's not the name they gave themselves. CrowdStrike gave them that name, but Scattered Spider, they don't actually make the ransomware. They partner with an affiliate program called DragonForce. So DragonForce makes the ransomware software. And then anyone can join the affiliate program and get copies of the ransomware, and you go and deploy it. And DragonForce takes about a 30% cut. You keep 70%. But the idea here is what we call ransomware as a service. Everything is as a service these days, right? But ransomware as a service. And these operators like DragonForce, they'll give you the ransomware software, the support channels to interact with the victims. And it's a very well-oiled, very well-run underground economy. And they have to be, because if you're a regular business and you make a mistake, maybe you get a fine or lose a customer. If you're a hacker group and you make a mistake or accidentally reveal yourself, you can go to jail. So we're seeing this advent of ransomware as a service, and that's being paired with what we call IABs, initial access brokers. And essentially, hackers will break into organizations and get comfortable, upload their tools, and then sell access to those organizations. So here's a screenshot from the underground. For between $2,000 and what's that, $10,000, you can buy access to these organizations and then go and do what you want, deploy ransomware or something else. What does a ransomware attack look like? Generally these days, it's broken down into two things: doing the actual hacking part and then deploying the ransomware part. And doing the actual hacking part, you have your traditional hacking, which is where you'll try and scan for exploits or vulnerabilities and use exploits to break in on edge servers and find default configurations with default passwords. But most modern hacks these days are down to what we call user error, user mistake, or manipulating users. The Scattered Spider group, their modus operandi is to phone up the help desk. Hey, it's Bob from accounting. I forgot my password. My MFA thing isn't working. Can you give me access? And they typically target third-party suppliers. So for M&S, it was I think it was the Tata group, the Indian third-party supply group, hacked them and then pivoted by what we call lateral movement to get into the main organization. What I'll show you here is a spearfish. And a spearfish is a customized email sent to somebody, enticing them to do something. Hand over access, run a file, download something, do something. In the demo here on your screen, you can imagine somebody, here's a bank, my made up bank, it's called the Bueno Bank. And here's poor old Rachel. She got an email. She's accidentally been carbon copied into this email, being told that she's being made, that her department, there'll be redundancies. She's accidentally been CC'd in as far as she can tell. And there's a Word document attached. And she thinks, well, Word documents aren't much of a threat. So she may open that Word document, and it just looks like some DocuSign type thing, small message, small warning in orange about enabling macros. Click the open button to, air quotes, decrypt the document. And if she was to do that, enable macros, decrypt, well, the document would air quotes decrypt. What's actually happening, of course, in the background is hackers are taking control of the computer. Very short demo here, I'm just using Metasploit. We'd use Metasploit to gain control of her system, burrow deep into the organization, get control of all the machines, and at some point, as the command ran on the screen there, deploy ransomware. On average, hackers spend 197 days on your network before you even know they are there. And how do you find out that they are there? Well, either ransomware is deployed and you get a ransom note, or you read it in the front page and usually been hacked, or maybe some friendly hacker comes and tells you that your files are available on the dark web. But for M&S, hackers stuck around about 2 months before we even knew they were there, and they announced themselves by emailing the CEO with a ransom demand. So in this little demo here, spearfish email, enable macros, breach an edge laptop, and then burrow deeper into the organization via that initial point of compromise, get comfortable. Hackers would upload their tools. It's all typically quite a manual process, and then they'll deploy their ransomware software. And what would that specifically technically look like? Well, here's our poor old user. They were trying to get on with their work, and their background on their laptop has been changed to an image. It's a great way for the hackers to get your attention. And this is from Lockbit. So all your files are encrypted by Lockbit. For more information, open this file, and you can see all the files down there. The extensions have been changed. If you try to open them, the contents are scrambled. Only file you can read is this notepad here, which just tells you that your files are gone. Please click this link to come and chat with us. The way that you interact with the hacker gangs, the ransomware gangs, is that you'll typically be offered a link to the dark web. You use a special browser, and you'll go and you'll start chatting with them. And you would negotiate a fee. They would help you with the decryptor software that they'll give you to get your files back. Lockbit got hacked earlier in the year, and all of their affiliate chat logs got leaked. So we can get a bit of a sense. I'll show you now how those discussions typically go down. So in this instance here, this company, my demo say they got hacked, and the IT guy would probably send a message. So these are real messages now from an MSP, a managed service provider, that got hacked. The MSP looks after the IT of lots of other companies. And here's the IT guy for an MSP, I won't say the company name, but they ask, how much is the ransom? The hackers come back. At the moment, our team of lawyers is studying your financial documentation. Today, we're not ready to name the price. And then they come back, $2 million US. They probably dug through your financials, figured out what you could afford, checked if you had cyber insurance. Oh, you have $3 million of cyber insurance. Well, pay us $2 million, and you keep $1 million for yourself for the cleanup. The IT guy comes back, just to clarify, since we're an MSP, we have 24 companies to the same decryptor. The hacker says yes. The IT guy says, okay, I'm trying to get money, but not everyone wants to participate. I can raise about $200,000. Is that enough? And the hacker says, are you sure you want to lose your reputation? We'll tell every company the hack happened because of your negligence. It's really driving in the screws there. Eventually, a lot of back and forth, but eventually the IT guy managed to raise just about $2 million. And they're struggling a bit on the time frames, and the hacker comes back and says, give me the exact date and time. Otherwise, I'll increase the ransom to $4 million. And of course, if you don't pay up, what happens? Your files get leaked onto the dark web, gigabytes and gigabytes of data. Okay, so what can you do about it? That's why we're here today, right? I want to tell you about how you can keep safe. What can you do? I'm going to break it down into 3 things: legislation, law enforcement, and tooling. The tooling will focus on Agger in a second. On the legislation front, the idea is that at a nation state level, what legislation is being pushed out. Here in the UK, the government ran an open consultation earlier in the year, and they made 3 proposals. The first is to ban ransom payments for CNIs, critical network infrastructure. So if you're a power plant or water and lights and that kind of thing, it will be illegal to pay ransom. The idea being that will deter ransomware gangs from targeting the UK's CNI operators. The other 2 pillars on the open consultation are around mandatory reporting of ransomware. So if you've been held ransom, you have to notify the government or the NCSC, and a payment prevention regime. So you have to tell law enforcement, you have to tell the government if you intend to pay ransomware or if you do pay ransomware. The idea is to try and slow down these gangs and make the UK a non-attractive target. Nothing is being ratified yet. We'll see how it goes, but we're also seeing lots of international cooperation, especially on the law enforcement front. So law enforcement has a lot more capabilities these days than they had previously. The analogy I use is like the moped gangs who grab your phones in London. 5 years ago, law enforcement couldn't really do anything about it. They couldn't take the police car and knock you off your moped or something because they weren't allowed to and they didn't know how to do it. Since then, they've been given training and the law has changed. So now they have the capabilities to bump you off your moped and arrest you. Similar with ransomware. Law enforcement now has a lot more capabilities, a lot more oversight and reach. And say at the beginning of last year, I think it was, Lockbit got taken down by a joint operation between the NCA and Interpol and others, Operation Kronos. Really nice strike against the ransomware operators. They played an Uno card against them. Law enforcement hacked Lockbit and released their files on the internet. So if your decryption keys were then available to go and download, Operation Kronos, Operation Serengeti in Africa, between multiple African countries, an entire network of ransomware gangs and cyber criminals got taken down recently. And then, of course, Operation Endgame, go and check that one out, where law enforcement has actively taken down the infrastructure behind the ransomware gangs, as well as a degree of doxing or embarrassing or releasing personal information about the hacker gangs themselves. But specifically on the tooling front, that's why we're here today. If you've ever heard me give a talk, and I give hundreds of talks, I always say that security is like an onion. There's multiple layers. Technically, we'd call that defense in depth, but an onion is an easier analogy. There are multiple layers and multiple things that you can do to keep secure. And we position ourselves as Agger Labs and our product Agger as the last line of defense. When everything else failed, you should have many other things in place. You should have MFA and zero trust and network segmentation and all these types of what we call cyber essentials type things, or basic cyber hygiene. But when those fail, I want to be your last line of defense. And that's where Agger Labs comes into the picture. So we've got about 2 years since inception of Agger Labs. And essentially 2 years ago, we looked at all the existing ransomware defenses on the market. And to be honest, they all sucked. It was somewhat trivial to bypass all AVs, all EDRs, and get ransomware deployed. Either bypass them or disable them. So we thought to ourselves, we're a bunch of smart hackers. Myself and my co-founders and my colleagues on the Agger team, we are all ex-hackers. We are pen testers, we are red teamers, we are master reverse engineers. We've spent our collective decades bypassing and messing with AV and EDR. And we decided to flip that model. Okay, can we rather build a defensive tool with our knowledge of being offensive operators? And that's how we built Agger. And Agger is a lightweight agent that runs on your endpoint and that does one thing and does one thing well. It just stops ransomware. We happily run alongside your existing EDR and AV. We're not trying to displace those players. Keep your EDR, keep your AV. They do very valuable, very useful things, but they're not great at catching ransomware. And we do that, and we do that very well, better than anyone else. I normally explain Agger as having 3 pillars. We have a pillar, 2 pillars to detect and kill ransomware, and 1 to keep Agger running on your endpoint. We have a core engine that runs at the kernel. We have a signed certificate from Microsoft. We're WHQL certified for our driver. We collect kernel telemetry, and we have a deterministic model, so no updates required. Deterministic model that will infer if a running process is exhibiting ransomware type behavior or not, and terminate it. Our second engine is our deception engine. We lay traps on the operating system. We bait ransomware interacting with us. We sprinkle the file system with enticing canary files. We lay traps in the registry and COM objects all over the system to try and bait ransomware into interacting with us. And every deception machine that we protect is subtly different. So we have dynamic defense, because hackers will go and get a copy of CrowdStrike or some other EDR, and they'll run it in a lab environment until they're able to bypass it. Because every other system's the same, they'll bypass those ones. But because every instance of Agger is subtly different, we have an extra layer of defense. Our third pillar is our anti-tampering engine. And we've almost put half as much effort into that as the entire other system, because there's no point in having a really good solution if hackers can just disable it once they break in. So our anti-tampering engine makes Agger absolutely bulletproof, like a watchdog component. It's also a tiny driver. You cannot stop our anti-tampering engine, and it keeps Agger alive. In fact, it's so effective that we're now building the capability for our watchdog to keep an eye on your other software. So have MDE or CrowdStrike or whatever other software you have, run Agger alongside it just for ransomware, and Agger will also keep those other essential pieces of software alive and running. Exciting news. We also have just received our SE Labs certification. So SE Labs is an independent third-party company, and they validate all the big players in this space. If you have the certification, basically they do rigorous testing. It's not just tick boxing. They do actual testing against real live ransomware samples. And we got a AAA rating, which means that if you don't believe me, believe them. AAA rating. Agger does what it says on the tin. We just stop ransomware, even 0-day variants, and all of our compute happens locally. Nothing goes to the cloud. Everything is local. Another exciting piece of news that's so recent I hadn't added to the slide deck, but we have just found out that we're one of the 4 finalists for the Black Hat Startup program in December here in London. So four startups in the security space have been selected to compete, and we are one of those. Really nice that they give us the nod and they see our value. What does Agger actually look like? Well, as I said, it's just an endpoint agent. So it just runs on your endpoint, on your machine here. You don't have to have the screen if you don't want your users to see it. It happily runs in the background, cannot be stopped, turned off, or terminated. all the compute is local. So unlike some of our competitors who upload telemetry to the cloud to compute and to see what should happen, all of our compute is local. As I said, we happily run alongside everyone. We've tested every EDR and AV under the sun, happily run alongside MDE, happily run alongside CrowdStrike, and we will catch the nasties that they miss, especially tweaked or 0-day ransomware threats. It's not overly trivial to bypass modern EDR solutions. Our architecture is also we have a web portal, so the agent runs on the endpoint, and then we have our web portal where you'll manage your estate. We've kept it elegant. A lot of solutions these days require hours and hours of setup and configuration. Agger takes about 30 seconds to install, and you can push it out via SCCM or BigFix, whatever solutions you have. Roll it out to 1,000 machines, about a minute. SCCM, run the MSI installer, they're up and running, nothing to configure, no training periods, no baselining or anything like that, just up and running and immediate ransomware protection. If you like this webinar, drop me a line afterwards. I'll have you up and running before the end of the day. And what happens? Well, when you try and run ransomware on the screen here, you see a folder appropriately named biohazard, trying to detonate some ransomware samples, just double clicking them. And at the bottom there, that is the crux of the matter. New incident, Agger detected and terminated, either by our core engine or our deception engine. In summary, Agger has no AI going against the grain there. We know when AI is appropriate. I have a graduate degree in AI and machine learning. And to solve this problem, we can do it much more effectively and efficiently without the black boxness of AI. The problem with AI, you don't know why things happen. It's hard to reproduce, lots and lots of false positives. I can't remember the last time we got a false positive. Our goal is to have very high fidelity messaging. If Agger Labs makes some noise, there's something you need to go investigate. So no AI, no updates. You don't need to receive updates to have protection. Lockbit 5 came out a couple of weeks ago, and I threw Lockbit 5 at Agger, immediately killed it. Turns out I accidentally ran it against a version of Agger from January, but same model, same core idea, but no updates required. We'll occasionally release updates if we change some big behavior or if we add some new functionality, but you don't need updates to stay safe. Whereas a lot of our competitors, they will let a patient zero, let's say, get infected. They'll learn about this new ransomware strain and then add the signature to their database. We have legacy support. We're super proud of that. From day one, we wanted to be able to support Windows 7 and Windows 2000, and we do. Windows 7, Windows 2000, all the way up to Server 25, Windows 11. Because unfortunately, it's the hard truth of the reality, especially in the healthcare space and in manufacturing, a lot of kind of physical devices are still tied to Windows 7 and Windows 2000. So we have full legacy support. 0-day protection out of the box. Brand new ransomware strain comes out, does not bother us. Agger will catch it with no updates. No cloud dependence. All the compute happens locally. There are all kinds of problems with some other solutions that have compute in the cloud. One is the latency. The message has to go back and forth. That's a long way to do a round trip. First thing hackers are going to do is disable outbound internet, or at least the route that goes back to the protection software. And then not much use if it's that trivial to disable your solution. And of course, just GDPR and things like that. Do you really want this your software to be sending this information out onto the internet? And that also leads on to the fact that we can operate in an air-gapped environment. So if you're a CNI or a power plant, or you just want to maintain control, Agger can operate in a completely offline environment, get it up and running, and then it needs no outbound internet. The only purpose of the internet is to send a bit of telemetry to the web panel, just to get a bit of information there. So no cloud dependence, complements your EDR. We're not trying to replace your EDR, we're enhancing it. Run us alongside your EDR. Keep your EDR. EDRs are fantastic at catching generic malware and viruses. They do all kinds of clever things, but we are laser focused on just one thing, and we do that right. We just detect and kill ransomware. And of course, we are now third-party tested and verified. Proof is in the pudding. And that is Agger Labs in a nutshell. We will pause for questions. If there's no questions, I can also do a bit of a live demo and show you what it looks like under the hood. Sorry, but first let's just see if there's any questions.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Glenn. That was really interesting. And I think your experience as well as a hacker and then reverse engineering really comes to light, especially when you mention things like supporting legacy softwares. That is a prime target, and everyone trying to defend knows that's a target. So that is really insightful. So we did have one question, and please, anyone listening, feel free to pop your questions in the chat or the Q&A function. And this is a question from Linton. Given your experience, what emerging threats, techniques, tactics, and procedures do you see that are not yet widely defended against?
Yeah, it's a good question. So how is the threat landscape evolving? So Lockbit 5 just came out, and one interesting story, I guess, or anecdote from this latest release, and we see other operators doing this, is the layers of encryption that they will use, and using different encryption keys almost per file. So if your defensive strategy was to, say, pull encryption keys out of memory when there's a ransomware attack, that kind of line of thinking isn't going to work anymore. So different encryption key for every single file. So you've got 1,000 files in your computer, 1,000 computers in your state. There's a million different keys that you would have to recover. We're also seeing a lot of the ransomware gangs almost merge or conglomerate. So I think maybe because law enforcement is pushing back and law enforcement is making ground, the hacker groups kind of think, okay, we need to work together now. So seeing a lot of between Scattered Spider and Lapsus and Shiny Spiders, these groups are almost coming together. It's like a real world merger almost. So definitely seeing a lot of that going on. One question that does come up a lot is the AI threat, and are we seeing threat actors adapting their techniques or their TTPs to incorporate AI? The short answer, I would say, is no, not at this stage anyway. Where we are seeing AI is maybe the phishing emails and the scams. They look a bit better because hackers are using AI to write better sounding emails or put up better phishing websites, but that's not really enhancing the actual capabilities of kind of stock ransomware. There are some cute examples here and there. Google just last week found some LLM component in some malware or ransomware. There was I think Asset uncovered. What did they call it? Had a cute name. Some new ransomware strain that was LLM enabled. So binary drops on your system and the tiny embedded LLM module that will do a bit of recon, figure out the environment you're in, and almost build custom ransomware for that endpoint. Turns out it's not that effective, but maybe the thinking is there in the future. Maybe AI will enhance the space, but not at this stage, I would say.
That's really interesting. I think it's that kind of element of the future, and maybe it's showing like the logic behind what may come, a little bit like how you showed, the logic of the first ever hack. It wasn't quite very right or very efficient, like having your postal address in it, but it's that thinking grew over years. So maybe that is something in years we would see a bit more of. We've got another question from Phil. So Phil's asked, what's your view on the protection Agger gives to an organization in the event of a double extortion ransomware attack? Have you found in practice that it's ever thwarted an extortion attempt where the data has already been exfiltrated? Or is your USP for organizations to avoid the panic of ransomware deployment and deal with extortion on the back of data exfiltration alone? So it's like three questions in one. So if you need me to repeat any, please let me know.
No, that's fine. I got the gist. The gist is, what about data being stolen? And that's a difficult problem to solve. So the upfront answer is, in its current state, Agger just detects and kills ransomware. The exfiltration front, we aren't addressing that yet. We have ideas, and we're building out ideas for the future. You can kind of tell that we call it DLP, so data leakage prevention. You kind of tell that market is they're not super effective by the number of companies operating in that space. Normally, when technology is quite effective, you have one or two big players and a whole bunch of smaller ones. The DLP market is so spread between so many small companies and products and offerings that the long answer short is that it's somewhat trivial to bypass DLP. what hackers will do is they'll break into the organization, they'll get comfortable, they'll understand how you operate. Oh, you use Amazon and AWS, so you probably use S3 buckets for your data storage. Okay, so we'll quietly and slowly package up your data, and then we'll slowly upload it to an S3 bucket. Some solutions, if it's a very obvious smash and grab and uploading to Mega or to an FTP server in Brazil, maybe you can catch those, but it's a really hard problem to solve. So our thinking is that to run Agger on your endpoints regardless, and at the very least, we will hopefully catch early behavior. So I mentioned earlier that our watchdog components, our anti-tampering engine, that will keep Agger alive, but it keeps an eye on your EDR and all your other software, and it will alert you if a hacker is trying to tamper with those things. Because the first thing a hacker is probably going to do, they're running MDE or something. Let's try and disable MDE. Agger will notice that behavior and notify you. It's a little bit of a tripwire in there, but specifically we don't deal with DLP yet, but we do have some excellent ideas on the back burner to roll out next year.
Brilliant. I'm very excited to see what you guys roll out. I think you can really tell that this is a product built by ex-hackers because of the way you think and the logic you take towards it.
Exactly that.
Oh, so just Phil from Phil, he gets the DLP aspect, but he was asking about the views on the mitigation it gives to the extortion attempts itself. So does it prevent any extortion of data?
No, not specifically. So what Agger will do is just stop the ransomware detonating. If there is an extortion going on and files have been stolen, that's a different problem requiring a different solution. I do have lots of ideas of ways to address that. With I mean, in general, my general advice is to use canaries, so things to canaries, so drop canary tokens. If you know me, I'm always talking about canary tokens. Got a pin on my badge here, got my Swiss Army knife, but sprinkle canary tokens all over your organization everywhere. And a hacker will trip over those when they're in the process of bumping up data for exfiltration. Going back to the onion analogy, there's a lot of things to have in place. We address detonation of ransomware, sprinkle your file system with those canaries, have staff awareness and training. There are some DLP solutions that do, maybe they're okay, but specifically our space is that we detect and terminate ransomware.
Fantastic. And I think, like you said, that's like the space you operate in and you do it well. That's what you just focus on. And that as well, stopping that ransomware detonating is super important. So it's like having something at that last line of defense that you trust and you know you can rely on, rather than it being like an add-on of another feature, a product that you're not too sure if it works or not. Like, Agger works. So another question. From Tyler, can Agger detect ransomware that's been sitting dormant within a system for some time, or is its main focus on preventing attacks at the front end before execution?
Yeah, good question. Agger is a behavior solution. What I mean by that is we won't, if there's lockbit5.exe just sitting on your file system, we won't detect that, because our space is we detect at runtime. When it starts running, when it tries to run, we'll detect it and we'll stop it before it does any damage. The only way we can do that, because we are no updates, no AI, no signatures, that 0-day component, there's no real way to detect that if something's not running yet. Have your EDR or your AV, they will have signatures and hashes and things like that, and they will detect some strains of ransomware before it runs. But there's no real way to detect a 0-day unknown threat before it detonates, unless you build some weird tiny VM and you try and run it or something. But that's not really feasible. So our angle is that we detect unknown threats at the point of detonation. There are other tools. I think the perfect combo is have Microsoft Defender, MDE. That's a very broad solution. They have signatures and they'll check the hash on the disk and that kind of thing. Maybe they'll detect the ransomware before it runs, and they'll do the generic stuff, and then have Agger running alongside your EDR. And as your last line of defense, as it detonates, we will stop it before it causes any damage.
Brilliant stuff. Thank you so much, Glenn. And then I guess probably have time for one more question if anyone has one, if they want to put that in the chat. Um, if not, I think one question oh, there is a comment. Okay, yeah, so okay. So Phil did have another question kind of following up on his one is if we're not looking at the extortion of the data, but we're looking at the extortion of the organization. So perhaps that would be, i.e., blackmail.
Yeah, I mean, the reason the hackers steal the data is to extort the organization. So if I'm a hacker, I'll break into your company. I will find your data. I will steal your data. Then I will deploy the ransomware to lock you out your systems. And I will, in my ransom note, I'll say, hey, pay me a lot of money. If you're not that interested in paying me, then I'll also blackmail. I'll say, oh, by the way, if you're not interested in paying, look, I've got a copy of your data. Here's a sample. Hurry up and pay up. Otherwise, I'm going to release this data on the dark web.
Brilliant. It is really interesting how they think and the way they extort. I didn't realize that they would go through and work out like what you can actually afford. It is quite scary to think. We did have another question as well then from Howard in terms of what layer of compute stack does the agent operate at?
So we are an agent that will run on your endpoint. So it's not like a network periphery tool or something. We have a signed driver. So we run in kernel space on your endpoint. We've got three components. Our Agger core, that's our deterministic engine that collects kernel telemetry via a mini filter that runs the heart of the operating system, but we're read only. Unlike some other products that will try they have write functions, which can cause blue screens of death sometimes, and big public outages of Windows systems. So we are read only from the kernel. Our deception engine is a lot more light touch. The bulk of that is in user land, and you can choose which option you want to run. You don't have to run both. It's like having a seatbelt and an airbag. Our core engine, our deception engine is much more light touch, I would say, but just as effective as the core. So some of our clients will only run the deception engine because they're a little bit nervous about us being in kernel space, and the efficacy is just as good, if not better, to be honest, with our deception engine. And then our watchdog component, anti-tampering, is a tiny driver module that's it's such minimal code that there's nothing that can go wrong there. But that's the endpoint architecture. Then it communicates with the C2, with the web panel. All those comms are encrypted and robust and routinely verified and tried to be broken by us. There's nothing particularly interesting in that telemetry anyway. You could operate offline if you wanted to.
Okay, fantastic. And I think maybe we'll just do quickly one more question because I do think this is a brilliant question from Saichi, is that what can Agger do if my organization is under a ransomware attack that has already been executed?
Yeah, very good question. In fact, that's why I added the button to our website. There's a big red button right at the top of aggerlabs.com that says under attack ? Click this button. That comes straight through to us with high priority. So if you are, I mean, if you get to the point that you are under attack, you want to reach out to us as soon as possible, or another incident response type company. We work with a couple of partners. We can also help you directly. That cleanup process and that initial phase, we call that IR, incident response. And what we recommend is during that process, that's actually a perfect time to deploy Agger. So if you're under attack, get in touch, and I will give you a copy of Agger for free. I won't charge. If you're under attack, I will set you up the same day, roll out to all your machines. Once the dust settles and you're back to operations, we'll chat about if you want to keep using it and maybe you want to buy a license then. But I'll absolutely give you Agger for free while you're under attack, just to try and contain it. Because the problem, what sometimes happens is you're under attack, you're trying to respond, you're trying to clean up, and then you get reinfected. And it's that reinfection point that can really hurt you. So let's roll out Agger across everything to stop it spreading and to stop reinfection. And during that process, we can help you with your incident response. But we also have a couple of partner companies who are special, who just offer incident response services. But at the very least, if you're under attack, get in touch. And if we can't help you, we'll point you to someone who can.
Brilliant. I think that's that mind of a hacker there coming out, is thinking about the reinfection, thinking already about how you could go down another route. So, and it's really interesting what you've built and how it operates and how it works, and just the mission, your Northern Light to completely eradicate ransomware is something I think we can all get behind. So I have put in the poll to get everyone's feedback on today's session. So if you found it useful, please pop it in your feedback. I want to take a moment to thank Glenn, and I know we've had quite a lot of questions this session. So if you do have some that you want to get in touch with Glenn and chat about, drop me an email and I can arrange for you guys to have a conversation. Thank you so much for all your time today. I hope everyone enjoyed it, and a massive thank you to Glenn for sharing his wisdom with us.
Yeah, thank you so much, Katie, for organizing it. And yeah, thanks everyone for attending.
Thanks everyone. Bye.